I'm Kathy Svatina, and this is the Efficiency Code, your guide to unlocking peak performance in finance and procurement. Listen as we decode the strategies of top industry leaders who are redefining efficiency and optimization. From spend management to lean operations, discover how to achieve more with less. Join us as we crack the code to sustainable growth. My guest today is Sanjay Bowry. Sanjay is a seasoned financial executive with a proven track record of driving growth and operational excellence. Currently, he is serving as a chief financial officer at Gravitee, where he is responsible for company's financial strategy, fundraising, and talent development. With a strong background in building and scaling high-growth businesses, Sanjay has a deep understanding of the tech and finance sectors. Prior to Gravitee, he held leadership positions at Vita, Mojo, Black Sheep Coffee, and People.io C8 management. Sanjay is known for his ability to build high-performing teams and deliver exceptional results. He is passionate about fostering a culture of innovation and growth, as well as operational excellence. Welcome to the show, Sanjay.
Thanks for that lovely introduction, Kathy. Great to be here.
So let's first talk about, what does sustainable growth mean to you?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. And I think it depends on the kind of CFO you are and the kind of company that you work for. So in my career, I'm lucky enough to work for some big corporates like Tesco and Philips. And then obviously I've had a bit of a startup career and a scale up career as well. So if you look at sustainable finance from a corporate perspective, you'll probably find that it's completely different from a startup perspective. So if you're in a corporate, sustainable finance is obviously all about return for shareholders in a public company. So how you can potentially, so for instance, working at Tesco, it would be about how to make each store profitable, how it would be looking at labor costs and your cost of goods sold, because you're a supermarket and you're selling goods to customers. While actually, if you look at a startup, and again, depends on what kind of startup scale up you're in, it could be accelerating growth. It could be growing your company and growing your positions in different territories. And actually, sustainable finance to me right now is a growth story. We're all about trying to grow our revenues, but while keeping our key metrics stable and actually probably trending towards profitability. So that means looking at your CAC payback, looking at your burn multiples, and making sure they're trending in the right direction, but not impacting growth from your revenue point of view.
And when you're looking at these metrics, and these are all great metrics to look at when you're trying to balance growth with sustainable growth, how often are you looking at them? I mean, especially if you're in a smaller company, are you looking at them every day? Are you looking at them on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? What's the cadence there?
So you look at them on a monthly basis, obviously within your management accounts pack and things that you would present to your board, depending on what your board was, so your VC. But if I take a step back, so from a scale up perspective, I think you're looking at these metrics at every decision point that you're going to make. How is it going to affect it? If I add 2 marketing heads or add this new program to my marketing spend, what is that going to do? It has an immediate impact on your CAC payback. When am I going to see the return? What is it going to do? Am I still going to be in those brackets of top performing multiples and comparisons? Because that's what investors will look at. So they want you to be in that top percentile or top quartile for those kind of metrics. If you're a really early stage startup, you're probably never looking at those kind of metrics and you're just all about growth and you're just going, where's the revenue going to come from? So again, depends on your stage. But for me personally, right now in a scale up, which is going towards a Series C fundraise and looking at going further towards an IPO at some point in the near future, we're looking at that at every decision point that we make, whether it affects the burn multiple, whether it affects ARR growth, whether it affects CAC payback, what's the magic number, and what's the rule of 40. Just making sure they're trending to top percentile metrics to our comparables.
And in a scale up, also, I would imagine that one of the things that you're also concerned about is efficiency, that you're as efficient as possible with with as little as possible that you can, because you don't have massive amounts of money. How does this work for you right now? Are there any things that you have found out that really surprise you in terms of efficiencies?
I don't think there's anything that probably surprises me, but I think as you go on your journey, one of the hardest things is obviously research and development, which every company needs, and you have to put money into developers, developing your product teams with product vision and strategy. And And obviously, to mark those, it's like, how do you go? What's too much? What's not enough? You can go from what's not enough if you're not building the product fast enough, if you're not making all the features that you need to do to catch up to your competitors. How do you grow your team sustainably? Because it might not bring in revenue for 6 months to a
Yep.
year, depending on what kind of product they're building. I've spoken to a lot of other finance leaders. There's no real metric that you can go, okay, this is the right R&D spend. You can look at, maybe it should be 50% of your revenue, maybe it should be affecting your rule of 40, and actually how that comes about. And actually, that's the way that I like to do it, is compassing it with all the other metrics and go, is the rule of 40? And sometimes it's the rule of 40 where revenue is doubled, revenue growth is doubled to get to that number. And that's the way that I like to look at it. But that's probably the nuanced one that is the hardest to track, and probably then the most surprising, because you're like, I just want to throw loads of developers at this problem. As any CTO will tell you, they want a bigger team, they want that faster, they want it. You're looking at everything like that, and that's where I think you've seen the growth in offshore kind of countries with cheaper development. So whether in Europe, that's Eastern Europe, whether that's South Asia. Recently, we've looked at Argentina to cover the US time zone. So, and again, that causes its own complexity, as you mentioned, in building kind of transformative teams, because you've got so many cultures that you need to bring together.
Yep, exactly. And for the listeners that are not familiar with the rule of 40, can you explain that to us and how you actually look at it?
Yeah, so rule of 40 is potentially a simple metric, which I actually don't like too much, but it's used by investors quite a lot, is your revenue growth, your ARR growth, for instance, if you're in a SaaS company, plus your EBITDA percentage. So, and if that is trending towards 40 as a positive number, so your growth is overtaking, in most start scale ups, you'll have a negative EBITDA because you might not be profitable yet. So actually, is that number a positive number? So your growth is outweighing your EBITDA, then that's a good thing. And most scale ups are actually probably trending towards like a -20 number in that kind of bracket, and -20 to zero to be a real core kind of Series C leader, if you like.
Sanjay, so you've had experience in large corporations and startups and in scale ups. How do you think that affected your leadership style and decision making?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think your management style really depends, obviously, on what your employees need. So in a big corporation, it's probably more about stability and getting the job done on a regular basis, on time, and just making them feel comfortable that they've got career progression. If they need it, they feel stable, and you're getting the answers to the shareholders. So a little bit more about stability, and probably managing kind of the pressure that they're under. And I think differs a little bit from a scale up persona, where actually everyone feels the pressure. You want them all to be on this journey with you. You want them to feel like you're making something great. One of the reasons I've joined the companies I've joined is because I've really believed in the vision of the company, the product, the mission that they're trying to do something, whether that be in Gravitee.io, where we're trying to become a category leader in something new and a category king, to Vita Mojo, where we were trying to transform the way the world eats. Those were kind of mission statements that I really, really believed in. And I want my employees and people who work for me to really believe in that as well, because you're going to go on this journey, and any kind of new business is a wave graph. You'll reach the peaks. There'll inevitably be something which is really hard to do, whether that be redundancies, you've not got a funding round, you don't get a sale that you want to get the next day. Then you'll go through another peak, and you'll do the biggest sale that you've ever done before, and then it will go like that. And if you don't really believe in the product or the mission, then you're not really going to survive that journey, in my opinion. So I think my three key tips, if you like, for managing people is: one, make sure they believe in the values that align to you. The second tip I would give, and this is probably more from my finance journey, is I like to have a skill set which is different to mine. So I'm a management accountant by trade. Generally, my first hire in any kind of company that I'm in is a strong financial controller, who understands the numbers, who really likes to get into that kind of level of detail, who loves the statutory accounts and things like that. So that's kind of what I'm not particularly good at it. I can do it, but also I don't love doing it. So I want someone who's really passionate about that. So compulsory skill sets. And then thirdly is actually people you want to spend time with. like outside of work. You might not actually do it that often, but you're going to be in the room with these people. You need to be able to have conversations with them. You need to have hard conversations. It's much easier to do that if you know that person, if you like that person, and you can be more honest with them. There's that old adage that teams used to be sold as families, but they're not families. They're sports teams. They got to be you want them at high performance at all times, and you need to be able to let people go. Like any good team, they go through transitions and different stages, and that's the way that I like to manage.
As you are building your finance team, is there a particular question that you really like to ask in an interview that it's very insightful to you?
So this is one actually from I've stolen from my old boss, which is, if you're sitting in a room with other finance professionals, what are you better than them at? What is your superpower compared to them? And the reverse of that question also I like to ask is, what are you worse at than that? What do you not like doing? Not everyone likes doing everything. I think we've all got to be honest about that. And in an interview, you want to sound like a superhero and that you can do absolutely everything and there's nothing wrong with you. But actually, that honesty of going, well, actually, I don't, I don't like, I don't know, T accounts, or I don't like VAT returns, or in the UK, or actually I don't really like doing the 409A kind of valuation stuff. There's stuff in everybody's job that they don't like. Sometimes you still got to do it, but if you're honest about it up front, then it's really helpful.
Yep. I'm going to put you on the spot right here.
Yeah.
What do you think is your superpower?
Probably my superpower is actually being able to explain finance problems to non-finance people. I've always been good at that. I like to think I'm good at it because actually I like to see myself as an entrepreneur first and a CFO second, so I can explain it in the ways that need to be explained to the right audience. And also because I like things that being explained to me like a 4-year-old most of the time anyway, so I try to do the same to everyone else. And I think you're probably going to ask me what I'm not good at, maybe if this is an interview. And well, probably not what I'm not good at, but what I don't enjoy really is like I said, I really love strategic projects, and I really like getting stuck in and making big decisions. And obviously, to do that, you do the modeling and you do that stuff. But as I've grown forward into that role, those are the stuff that I really want to concentrate my career on now.
I really like your vision of being an entrepreneur first and a CFO second, because that is so rare. And how do you think that type of mentality is influencing your perspective when you're making financial decisions?
The way that's kind of set me apart is I can probably see the bigger vision quite quickly and like where we're trying to get to. So you mentioned before, when do we look at metrics? When we know the metrics that we need to hit, because we know probably the fundraise that we want to do next, and actually that's what we're aiming for. So that's when I look at the metrics that I mentioned earlier, like CAC payback, ARR growth, and things like that. And actually just being able to tell that story to the wider group and going, actually, this is why we're making this decision. This is why we're doing this. And actually them understanding that I'm not only thinking about this from a finance point of view, but I'm thinking about it from a wider business viewpoint and what that might mean to your employees as well, bringing them on that journey. And I think that's probably what being an entrepreneur first means, in my opinion, is taking the business alongside you with any financial decisions that you make, rather than just making a pure finance decision, whether it be, I'm going to cut costs here because we need to cut costs. What's the reasoning behind it? What's actually the end goal behind doing that? Which I don't think a lot of people are actually very good at doing.
I always say that it's not about cutting costs, it's about optimizing costs.
Yeah.
Because if you're just cutting it, willy nilly, it's really not going to serve the
Yeah.
company. Like really thinking about where is the company going to be a couple of months down the road, and is that cost going to serve you or is it going to take away from it?
Yeah, I agree. And I think actually you want most of your company to be somewhat finance literate anyway. So you'll have people asking you, can I get this new system and it's going to change the way that I do things? And you kind of got to take them through, okay, well actually what's it going to add to the company? Where is this the right time for it? Because a lot of the time people are buying software way too early in their journey. And actually but they can hold off for it for a year because we're made to feel bad if we're building companies on spreadsheets and we're not using AI here, or we've not got that tool in place. Everyone is a SaaS company and everyone's trying to sell you something, but you need to pick those right SaaS companies at the right time.
And this is such a great point, because How do you, as a finance leader, manage that so that you get a total clear picture of the software spend across all of the organization so that, the sales people aren't duplicating the cost that the marketing does? How do you keep track of all of that?
Yeah, so actually at the moment we do this via like kind of very basic means. We have it in our spreadsheets. We give it to the team every month and say this is your kind of spend that you're using. These are the systems that you're using. We are at this moment in time looking to implement tools that allow us to do that kind of automatically, and that's a way to do it. But really, I think the key thing for us is making sure that every employee feels like they have some cost awareness, and
Mhm.
that cost awareness culture, as I like to call it. So going, actually, I'm using this, but actually, if I don't spend it, I can probably spend it over here, or I could potentially get a new employee in who can do this. And actually, if you start again managing each of your teams with the understanding of what a cost might mean, then
Yeah.
actually, and not actually just, like you said, it's optimization. It's not necessarily that you don't want to spend the money because you're already spending it, but it's actually where else can it be better used. And that's generally the conversation that you need. But back to your question, yeah, we're quite at the moment we're using spreadsheets. Previously in other companies we've brought in different vendors who can help us do that. And then I think going forward is something that we're looking at is usage of those monitoring and optimization tools.
And how do you build this into the culture that people are so aware of the cost and the optimization of cost? Is it that you do that in your training, in your onboarding, or is it just so embedded in the culture that people essentially just kind of pick up on, everyone else doing it? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think it's probably hard to get every employee to care,
Yeah.
if I'm really honest. But if you get the right level of employee to care, and at that my level, it's making sure all the C level understand their budgets and actually what they're spending it on, and actually what we're aiming for. So, like I said before, we've got a very clear vision of where we want to go. Eventually, want to IPO. Eventually, to do that, you might need 100 million ARR, for instance. Let's say to raise the next round, you need to be at, I don't know, 20, 30 million ARR, 40 million ARR, whatever the numbers are. How are you going to get there? What other metrics do you need to be able to make that step? And actually, again, taking them on that journey of going, well, actually, look, you spend there, this goes down. And what's the impact of each thing that you do? And also then have a culture of, actually, I can negotiate contracts, I can consolidate vendors, I can do stuff, I'm duplicating here. And actually, we've got a very we've got I feel like everyone's bought into that because they know the end point that we're trying to get to, and understand, actually, if I don't spend here, I can do this. If I don't do this, I can do that. If I this isn't the right vendor for me, so I can actually go off and do that. Ultimately, that's what we've managed to achieve.
Yep. And do you do that organically or is it through an official procurement function?
I would say it's organic at the moment. It's as we get bigger and as I work for bigger teams, it's probably you're looking at procurement as something that you want to bring in. But I think for scale ups generally, it needs to be organic, because again, you want people to be on this journey with you. You want them to be on the vision, and that's a way to do that as well. And everyone taking ownership of their own bucket, like they take ownership of their people, they need to take ownership of their tools as well.
Yep, that makes sense. And I want to go back into the financial literacy that you mentioned, making sure that the people in non-finance roles have the financial literacy. How do you train them on that? Do you have specific meetings where you explain this is your P&L, this is what it means, this is what you should be looking at? I'm really interested, like how do you manage that in the Gravite?
Generally, I try to do that on a one-to-one basis. And actually, what I found is, we do a bit on the onboarding and say, hey, do you know ARR is annual recurring revenue, but and these are the metrics, this is our growth metric, but people generally know all of that stuff. But really, it's in one-to-ones where people are interested and going, actually what I find is most employees are interested in fundraising because that's the sexy word and that's what everyone wants to do. And actually, what you want to do is go, well, forget about that hundreds of millions of pounds that you can raise and the crazy valuations. What does that actually mean? What are they looking at? And taking them through a little bit of that. So actually, it's a multiple of ARR generally that's a valuation is based on. But then actually, they look at these other metrics, as I mentioned before, the key metrics that we try to measure: CAC, payback, burn multiples and rule of 40, magic numbers and things like that. Actually say, well, actually, this is what I measure it on and what I care about, because that means later on when we come to getting these fancy valuations, this is what's going to drive us forward, and that's the reason. And that also goes into every decision that you're making. So whether that be, hey, I'm looking at again, if you just think about tools, it's going to affect one of those metrics along the line, and how is it going to affect that? If it's there's a big version of a lot of AI coming into marketing right now, and whether you use systems like Clay for automation, and companies like Six Sense, or things on LinkedIn leads and stuff like that. Actually, what does that actually mean to you? When is it going to start impacting the numbers? It at some point needs to bring in sales, but while it doesn't, and you've got the cost, what is it doing, and how do you measure all of that? And what's the impact? Hey, if I bring in $100,000 vendor contract here, I need to find that somewhere later on down the line.
I really like this because it's not a, you know, us finance people, finance is like the best thing to slice bread,
Yeah,
right? But for someone who doesn't live in this world, it can be a very dry, boring type of topic.
yeah,
So actually taking it from a perspective, what does it mean to them and how does it actually affect them? It's
yeah,
such a game changer because now they're invested in ARR and CAC and all
yeah.
all of these terms that generally just wouldn't mean nothing to them.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously by employee type. Salespeople care about their commission at the end of the day. How am I going to get the commission? Is it going to affect my sales? Can you help me get more sales? Can you help me get more SQLs? Marketing people want more MQLs, more SQLs, want a better funnel. R&D people want more tools to make their life easier for them. Everyone has their want list and their wish list. Actually, it's measuring them individually. You can't measure everyone together. So when you talked about financial literacy, it's not necessarily the same financial literacy for everyone, because probably, and this may or may not be true in every organization, the R&D function doesn't really care about sales growth because that's not something that they're seeing every day. They just want to make a great product. And actually what finance literacy means to them is something completely different to what it means for a salesperson who only cares about sales growth. And you've got to kind of measure each person on their own merits and what's important to them.
Yeah, it's one of those, old adages of you have to know your audience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
You mentioned a couple tools already. Are there any tools that you have used in the scale up phase that have been a particular game changer for you?
I think everything which saves you time is a game changer, because time is your most valuable asset. And it can be as simple as the payroll tools. We've just started using Tapalti, for instance, to do a lot of our processing and things like that, which saves hours of time. But it's not only tools; it's making sure the back end functions are done efficiently, and you've got processes there. But I guess I couldn't give you any specific tools, but which I really think of this is a game changer. But I think they're finding the right fit for you. So actually, the biggest game changer for me probably is actually, and I spend a lot of time with investors, but at Vita Mojo we were crowdfunded initially from I think 1,700 investors. It meant I had a crazy cap table. So cap table management software there was a game changer because I could just see everyone in one click rather than a spreadsheet with 1,700 names. And you can imagine
Yeah.
the complexity of kind of managing that with people who had put in £10, and this was before nominee structures and all of that. So that one was a real game changer for me. But yeah, in each organization it's different, but really it's the ones that save you time and also give you insights that you didn't have before.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with that. It really depends on the company and what the needs are.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I have seen, especially because I come from a big corporate background, there is a significant amount of inefficiencies and waste, especially in the financial processes. Have you seen something like this in scale ups and startups, or is it pretty lean?
You're naturally going to be leaner because it's easier to see those costs and they make such a direct impact to your metrics. So actually, if I ask myself the question, how do I get my net burn down from X number to X number?
Yeah.
Immediately I have to look at the costs that I don't know about, because I know my headcount cost. I know how, like, that's pretty simple. I know the people and HR. Talking about software, HiBob, for instance, for an HRIS software is something that I've used in every company I've worked in. And it's such an easy way to see all the people and link it to payroll, etc., etc. That's the way that you have to like really embed yourself as a CFO also into your business, is going, actually, who are our top 10 spenders and or vendors outside of like your core AWS and stuff like that. But even there, you can always make some sort of saving by just, actually one of the bigger adages is you just got to phone people and you just got to go, hey, you know, this is the contract. I'm signed for a year. It's coming up to a renewal. What can you do for my price for the next year? And I think actually so much is on auto renewal, and
Yeah.
that's actually quite a dangerous thing for scale ups because actually you just end up having these costs. You bring in a new person, they don't love it. So actually, I don't generally love signing up to anything more than 12 months because I know it's going to change. And, you get a better discount if you sign for 2 years, but is there point in having a system for 2 years when actually the next person wants to change it anyway, and then you end up running two systems which do the same thing? And so yeah, I think it's a lot leaner in scale ups just because you're living and breathing it probably more every day to make sure you're not spending incorrectly.
Yeah, and this is especially important for SaaS costs because what I have seen, and I have experienced this on my own too, you will sign up for a particular subscription and then a year later it's going to be triple in cost. And if
Yeah,
you have that auto renewal, that can really ruin a budget before you've even
yeah,
gotten off audit.
and also if you forget, like had instances before where we've forgotten to give in our notice period, and then you realize, oh, I've got to give in my notice period, and then I've got to shut it down, but they don't. You've got the contract with them, so you end up doing negotiation to buy out of it earlier for a tool that you never end up using, and those are horrible conversations because you're just spending money which you can spend elsewhere, but just because you've missed a deadline. So I generally try not to sign stuff with auto renewals as well, and that's actually a big watch out to most finance leaders. I would say is that auto renewal bit is it can be a nasty surprise if you don't read the fine print.
Yeah. And how do you keep track of all these contracts? Do you have a contract management system or do you have a spreadsheet somewhere? How do you keep track of all of these?
At the moment, it's a spreadsheet that actually we created only a couple of months ago. Actually, when we really took on board, we were doing a lot of the metrics, and I realised that we didn't do this, and we didn't have really good control over this. We are now moving towards actually doing a tender for a system, and looking at a couple there, and I think that's the way to do it because it is growing. And one of the things that I love about the systems in place is you have clear ownership, so you put a name next to each vendor. They're the ones who decide which are the users on it, which how many users do you have. That's another thing which always crops up is you have, I can even talk about my WeWork membership in Denver.
Yeah.
I have an office full of 10 people, but actually as people come and go, they have different cards, and then you have to go swap them, and then they charge you $25 for a card, and it's an absolute nightmare when you're managing stuff like that. But it's similar with SaaS models, and SaaS contracts. You've got users who are linked to it, and actually for even something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, all your AEs want to be on it. Actually, when as new people come on board, you need to add on a cost there, and all of those kind of things. So yeah, definitely moving towards a model where all of that is a little bit more easy to see, and that users monitoring is available, and they all come with a different niche. You just need to find the one which is right for you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, Sanjay, you have been doing, finance in the bigger companies, you've been doing startups, you have been doing scale ups, and you're currently a CFO of a scale up that's growing, potentially an IPOing down the line. What is next for your career?
Yes, good question. I think next for my career is, the CFO role has changed dramatically since I even took over my first CFO position in kind of like an early stage company. You have to do so much. You have to move towards looking after people. So I look after the HR function of our company. I've done that previously in other companies as well. You end up looking after operations, maybe even data analytics, all of those kind of things. So I think like as AI comes into it as well, and you see a lot more AI monitoring, and actually that's something that finance can really get involved in because actually the data is there and the data analysis is easily available. It makes life a lot easier from even like a marketing perspective. I think the future of a CFO has always in scale ups has always been a little bit of a fine line between a CFO, a chief of staff, a COO, and probably somewhere all in between. Although your core bit is making sure the finances are correct. For my career personally, I think, like I said, I like to be involved in the strategic projects. The job title probably put aside for 1 minute, but how can you take a company from this stage to this stage to that stage? And that's actually what are the projects in between. Can you get involved in M&A? And M&A doesn't necessarily need to be about the numbers, but about the people, about the product. How do you really understand that? How do you really grow a company from point one to point two? Is that about, as we talk about it in Gravity, is about becoming a category king and a category leader, because you only have about 6 to 10 years to become that from your incorporation. That's what history's shown us. So really being strategic and kind of really focusing on those values, whether that be in a CFO role, a COO role, CO, chief of staff role, whatever you want to call it. I think predominantly it's looking after those really key features of growing a company. And so probably chief growth officer is probably like a title that, which encompasses finance, operations, every staff and everything else with it's probably something. But I have heard recently actually chief financial officers being called chief value officers, which I quite like. And a lot of articles being written about that, because actually that's all we're trying to do is bring value to an organization. So I probably will take that one as my next step as really chief value officer and bringing great value to everyone in the organization.
I like that one, and I can definitely see you in that role.
Cheers, appreciate that, Kavi.
So my last question for you is, what's your number one tip for finance leaders when it comes to tackling rising SaaS and cloud costs that we talked about?
I'd probably go for that cost awareness culture that I mentioned before. Can you create a cost awareness culture in your organization at the right level to make sure that people care about it as much as you're about to, or you do care about it? I can put tips in there for about implementing tools, negotiating contracts, maybe implementing chargebacks and stuff like that. But really, if you don't have that cost awareness culture, it's not going to resonate with anyone. They're not going to look at it for you. You're going to be in charge of it. Going to be like herding sheep, as we say in England. Like it's not going to be easy. So really, how do you get people to care about it as much as you do, or your finance team does? How do you show them the impact of optimization, or even spending money? Like we talked a lot about optimization. Spending the right money is also equally as important. So that cost awareness culture really has to be throughout the organization, and that's probably my biggest tip.
Yeah, and that's a great tip. Thank you so much for this, Sanjay. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it.